Welcome to Government Executives Excellence in Government podcast. I'm Mark Micheli. On October 1st, Americans across the country got their first look at the president's signature piece of legislation in action, and what they saw they didn't like. Since launch, the Obamacare website has been in complete disarray, creating headaches for those struggling to get health care and putting into play a domino effect of tech-driven disasters that threaten to derail the Affordable Care Act entirely, undermining President Obama's remaining time in office. Politics aside, the best way out of the mess is to simply fix Obamacare's shaky website. Noble Ackerson is a former state government employee and founder at Byte and Atom Research, a development company focusing on software and hardware accessories in the wearable computing space. He knows a thing or two about launching tech initiatives quickly and effectively. He's here to talk about what went wrong with HealthCare.gov and how, in the next few weeks, the government can work to get it back on track. Noble, thank you for joining me.
Glad to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Now, let's just start at the beginning. Where did this thing go wrong?
In this day and age, when rolling out a website of that complexity and magnitude, I would assume that they would have had to put a lot of phases of testing as they sort of built, hopefully in an agile manner, meaning sort of building it bit by bit and testing along the way. With that sort of methodology, they would have come across a lot of the pitfalls from security to UI to user flow throughout that process. It seems due to the choke points we all see or has been reported upon that none of that was done. And it sounds harsh, but it doesn't seem as if it was done, and if so, it wasn't done effectively. And that's, I think, where we are today. A lot of people are trying to either patch fix or undo some of the mistakes that were done during that rollout.
Going to your point about testing, it was reported that the site may have only gone through as little as 2 weeks of testing. And we're approaching a point, again, where there's only about 2 weeks to go before the promised fix will come around December 1st, or at least a much more operational site. What about that raises red flags for you, and why, in your experience, has the testing process been so vital?
We, over the last couple years, smaller firms and even larger ones have sort of adopted a methodology that allows us to sort of avoid it's called a waterfall methodology, meaning one guy the database developer goes and does all the database stuff. The systems integrator goes and does all his or her stuff, and the front end person does all their UI changes, and everybody comes back and then they put it together. That in itself has obvious problems, probably are familiar with, because one guy doesn't talk to the other guy. No testing is done along the way. Everyone goes into their caves and comes back a few weeks later with a solution that was based on a specification, and then they try to sort of shovelware or just put it together. And a lot of companies have sort of bailed on that for incremental testing as the product is being built, hopefully in an ideal world with all stakeholders being communicated with along the way. That lean type of methodology has been adopted, obviously, from industrial style organizations over the years and sort of adapted to software development. Frankly, we're here because that wasn't done effectively.
Now, looking at the process where you say running the production effort behind HealthCare.gov, what would you have done differently?
I don't really know the intricacies of this thing, but I do know that one thing that should have been done was have all stakeholders, from the low-end systems administrator to the copywriters to the executives, all have weekly, bi-weekly, nightly sessions, meetings together, so that the likelihood of people in Kathleen Sebelius's office would have been up to date as to what was going on, as would the lawyers or the person in charge of infrastructure. Every person, all hands on deck, all the time, from the very, very beginning of the process to the to the time you push into what they call staging, test during staging. and work out all the kinks that may have been missed, even with those nightly sessions. And then by the time you roll into production, you're just you're sure that the app is bug free and it can withstand the load. The user flow is seamless. A lot of times we think too much about security, which is very, very important. We think too much, and that's rightly so. We think too much about the application and bugs. Sometimes during that whole workflow process, we miss, what does it take for a user to actually go through, browse available options that fits their family, and then check out or sort of select the appropriate plan for them. And that process was also broken.
Do you think that's an issue of creating too high a demand on the capacity of the site, or that the friction was too high for people to even consider using the site from a user experience standpoint?
Outside of the obvious bugs, yes, absolutely. The user experience was not well thought through, or there was a call made at some point to sort of collect information. Now, in hindsight with that, I should mention that call may have saved them quite a bit of hassle later down the line. I'm guessing the call was made because they knew that they weren't ready, as in they anticipated a few bugs. So collect information ahead of time so that if the world starts unraveling around this project, at the very least you have collected information from these users that were interested. And like the president said a few days ago, just go back to those people and tell them, hey, we fixed the problem, and you can come back and finalize your sign-up process. That's unfortunate that buffer was put in place, but it helps. It helps to sort of quantify how many people were interested.
Like you just said, last week the president came out and he pledged to have a much better functioning site ready to go on December 1st. And he didn't say it was going to be perfect, but he said it was going to be better, and that it would be better than it was the week before that and the week before that. Do you think that claim rings true? Do you think they can do this? Do you think they can get it turned around by December 1st and have something functioning, ready to go?
I think no one knows, and that's, in my opinion, a result of bringing in a quote unquote SWAT team to try to mitigate whatever issues were set. I would hope so, for the sake of the president's signature program, but we don't know. I'm guessing that they have the best people in place. The lessons learned will hopefully sort of make their jobs a whole lot easier in order to deliver on that. Given the president's talk and lack of sort of concrete, this will happen by the end of November, beginning of December. I'm assuming that if he doesn't know, then we all don't. We shouldn't speculate that it is going to, in fact, roll out on time.
From where you're sitting, what are the biggest obstacles to fixing this quickly and effectively? Can government, by its very structure, get this done? You've worked in state government before.
I would, from where I'm sitting, would sort of scrap the project and start from scratch, and that would be disastrous for the administration, so we know that wouldn't happen. The reason why is based on what we know, the amount of code that has gone into this project alone. I can only imagine is only maybe doubled, who knows, due to fixing the problem. In an ideal world, it would have been sort of slimmed down, trimmed, remove functionality that wasn't absolutely needed, such as the sign up to browse functionality, for example, or even simplifying the user flow would then sort of slim down the code base of the site as well. But if I were sort of king of the castle, I would somehow convince the administration to scrap the website, tell the country that it's going to take a few more months. That way, they have the time to sort of do it right. from scratch.
Why did this site get so bloated? Is this like a Dickens style model of paying coders where they're paid by the line, or was this just a poorly organized effort?
I can only imagine, based on my experience, systems like this with the contractors that were used would have sort of had baseline frameworks or platforms that HealthCare.gov was eventually built upon, which means in order to save cost or in order to meet cost, you are taking an existing, maybe off the shelf or maybe off the contractor's portfolio of applications, which is why they may have won the contract. And then that alone has its bloatware or functionality. And then they would then sort of add or remove functionality to meet the code. But in my experience with the state, with the Commonwealth of Virginia, there was a lot of, take for example, Whitehouse.gov, which is built on I believe a Drupal platform, and it's not a custom application. So that alone has, you look at it and it's a functional application that is built on an existing CMS. So the code base there includes things that perhaps a presidential website wouldn't need. But that affects speed, that affects flow. It includes functionality that may not be needed. But who knows?
Do you know, and maybe, again, going back to some of your experience at the state level, how many of these problems from where you're looking at all this take place are a result of the way in which government buys technology?
I think that's a huge problem, and the president addressed that himself in the state. Alone, after leaving the state, I decided to become a consultant, a contractor for other state agencies and stuff like that. And that was a tough road, especially for smaller, nimbler companies. A lot of red tape, a lot of processes that sort of hindered the more agile, nimble companies to sort of play in that space. There are tons of flexible companies out there, smaller companies out there that would sort of build an effective solution. I think from state to federal, and it's worse on the federal level, there are IQCs, indefinite qualification contracts and whatnot, that they have to honor. These are laws and policies that have been in place for a long time. And unfortunately, in the world of sort of rapid fire style web development, where you sort of build, test, build in small increments and chunks, you find some of the existing infrastructure to purchase contracts sort of hinder that.
When you think about the as a service model it's growing in popularity within the government, which really takes the burden off of a lot of IT budgets. When you look at this project, was a as a service principle at all at play in putting this thing together?
I'm pretty sure that was in play. I think it would be very ill-advised to a cloud infrastructure that obviously is government compliant. One thing that I have to note is that in order to go with a software as a service model, it has to sort of meet the requirements, hopefully very rigorous requirements that the government puts in place. Because these are, you can't just go to just any old infrastructure as a service or software as a service company in order to store data or store stuff in the cloud. But in order for that to happen, it would have had to be a secure cloud-based platform. I don't know for a fact, but I'm highly confident that this was built with that in mind.
Because a lot of the problems I experienced through them were capacity. How easy is it to break the back of something that's been built specifically for a cloud services model? Do you think we would have seen as big of a breakdown if it was truly kind of cloud-based?
If you were to sort of, cloud doesn't really mean that nothing bad can happen, right? It depends on what you are storing in the cloud. I personally don't know the and I don't think we've been told where the system broke. We have, the talking heads and people on TV have made it known that perhaps it might have been on the system integrator side. There have been other I've made my own speculation on this call alone that it might have been sort of a combination of all of the above. But I think, finding a suitable cloud solution would have certainly helped and sort of alleviated a lot of the burdens and a lot of the costs associated with sort of hosting your own infrastructure.
In the future, as we kind of look back on what's happened here, what do you think government's going to learn from this? What can government learn, and how can it be more effective in the future?
Government is going to learn, if not already, I'm pretty sure it's already learned, that the whole procurement process has to be reformed. It has to be reformed to meet the agile nature of building software. And we tend to forget that a website that stores millions of personal information and does so much as this HealthCare.gov website was designed to do, we don't look at it as an application. And in fact, it is. And we need to sort of adopt some of the successful processes that some of the world's top software infrastructure design companies have sort of put into place. And it's going to take a lot of work. I'm actually, unfortunately for the administration, this happened, but I think it's a great thing that it happened. It's going to sort of hopefully propel the procedures on how we deliver software solutions. And I think that's very necessary.
If there's a silver lining here, that's certainly it. Noble, thank you so much for your time.
I'm glad to have been a part of it.
Noble Ackerson is founder of Byte and Atom Research. Follow him and his work on Twitter at Noble Ackerson. Thanks for listening to the Excellence in Government podcast. Check us out on Twitter at GovExec or on the web at govexec.com. To subscribe, search iTunes or Stitcher for GovExec. I want to thank podcast producers Ross Gianfortuni and Kelly Martin, and our guest, Noble Ackerson. I'm Mark Micheli, and this has been the Excellence in Government podcast.